Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. All right. All right. So, welcome to the Mikestand, everybody. Um, today is May Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. Of course, we're going to give people a chance to come in before we get started. Do have one article from Bounding into Comments to go over tonight. Of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, we're just right now we're going to go ahead and just gonna see if I can get more people interested or try to get more interested. All right, so let's see. Well, let's see. We're after the 2 minute mark here, and we got 3 people in here now. All right, so here's what's on tap for tonight. We got, as I said, we got one article we're going to go over about the. Of course, we're going to go over the recent passing of Peter David, legendary comic figure that done work with primarily did a lot of work with Marvel, among other things, including, well, he was Spider-Man 2099, Young Justice, and X Factor among his credits. We'll do that. We'll have the wrestling wrap up. We'll go over the wrestling wrap up tonight. Look back to last night's Monday Night Raw. Look ahead to tonight's NXT. I know I didn't give kind of a preview for last night's Raw, but with everything else going on that we're covering, you understand why. And then we'll wrap things up, of course, with this day in each history. So, with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started here then? Let me go ahead and pull up the article here, and we will get going here. All right, so here we go with our article tonight that we're gonna go over here. So, legendary Spider-Man 2099, Young Justice, and X-Men Factor or X Factor writer Peter David passed away at 68 following health struggles. Article by Spencer Cooley, published today. All right, so this has been a story going around for last few days here. So I think he passed away sometime in the last days. But let's get into this. Earlier this year, word began to circulate across the comic book side of the internet that legendary comic book writer Peter David, whose works have run the gauntlet of characters, publishers, and even mediums, had been dropped from Medicaid and forced to turn to crowdfunding for help covering the cost of his various health struggles. It thus breaks our heart to report that roughly 2 months after bringing this development to our readers' attention, David has sadly passed away at age 68. As previously reported, David's health problems first began to rear their ugly heads in December of 2012 when the writer suffered a massive stroke. Quote, we were on vacation in Florida when I lost control of the right side of my body, unquote, wrote David to his personal blog shortly after it happened. Quote, I cannot see properly and I cannot move my right arm or leg. We are currently getting the extent of the damage sorted out and will report as further details become clarified. Unquote. Though David would eventually make a general recovery, reporting in June 2013 that, quote, my right shoulder still hurts and my endurance is not remotely what it was, but I am working to return to normal, unquote. His health hit another road bump just a year later when he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. While the next few years would see him stay in relatively good health, so much so that he even returned to writing comics, David's health issues would once again rear their ugly heads in 2022. Opening a GoFundMe page to help with the author's resulting expenses, in parentheses, which itself would eventually far exceed his initial goal thanks to the generosity of his fans, unquote. Family friend Graham Murphy explained in the campaign's description that David, quote, had some compounded health problems and the bills are piling up. On top of kidney failure, and the steep medical bills incurred from that, he just had another series of strokes and a mild heart attack. Unquote. Sadly, David's situation only continued to worsen, and after being dropped from the U.S. Medicaid health insurance program in March 2025, Murphy once again turned to the public for help. Quote, Peter's health issues continue to be a challenge, unquote, detailed the family friend. Quote, he has been in recovery now for 3 years. Peter's steadily improving, even with his kidney disease, minor surgeries, and some recent small strokes. But Medicaid, which had been taking care of his long-term disability, had just dropped him. As a result, medical care and living expenses are mounting beyond current control, so we are reaching out to you for help. Unquote. Hmm. Per updates provided by O'Shea, David to the campaign's by O'Shea David to the campaign's page, while David's health began to show signs of progress in early April. Quote, Peter's white count is normal for the first time in a year and a half, unquote, wrote his wife. Quote, this news makes me feel more relaxed, unquote. The last week of the month would see doctors discover, quote, an issue with the arm fistula, in brackets here, a surgical connection made between a given vein and an artery in order to strengthen the former and allow for dialysis procedures to be performed upon an individual, unbracketed, unquoted. Putting David, quote, under the knife again, unquote, in order to resolve the issue around May 7th, O'Shea David would later confirm that, quote, his fistula was fine, but they found a blockage in uh, um, in his right shoulder, that was not allowing blood to flow freely, um, unquote. And that the hospital surgical team had subsequently treated the issue. Quote, Peter is doing better, unquote, wrote his wife on May 16th. Quote, his right hand no longer looks balloon. He says he is in less pain. He is very sleepy. I mean, yeah, being sleepy. I mean, his body is really fighting. Was fighting there. It sounds like finding hard to stay alive and stay active. Hmm. Let's see. And again, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Hold on a sec. I forgot to do that. Sorry about that, folks. Forgot to do a couple of things before the show, including turning off my phone or turning the ringer off of my phone. Anyways, sorry about that. All right. So I guess let's get back to the article then. I said if you haven't already, you can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, here we go. Let's get back to the article here. So, 2 days later, O'Shea David would reveal that her husband was now, quote, in the ICU with difficulty breathing due to a bilateral pneumonia, unquote. Quote, this is the worst shape he is in since November 2022, unquote, she added. Writing another update on May 19th, O'Shea David explained, quote, the fever is broken. That's back to normal. They are working on the multiple infections. He is still lethargic, but that is normal considering what his body is going through, unquote. Mm-hmm. The next day, she would further note that, quote, due to his inability to cough or clear his throat, he is temporarily on a ventilator. His color is much better, and he is moving his limbs, which is a good sign. He is under light sedation to keep him from fighting the tubes down his throat, unquote. On the morning of May 23rd, which would have been last Friday, I take it, O'Shea David would switch her update platform of choice, GoFundMe, to Facebook, taking to her personal page to inform the public, quote, in bracket, Peter is, unbracketed, still on the ventilator and in G2. They have removed sedation and are trying to get him to wake up. So far, he has not complied. Occasional, he will wake up, but it is for a brief time. We wait to see what is happening. Yeah, well, sounds like it was getting closer and closer to. I guess his body was just finally, unfortunately, giving out. Well, I don't. Depending upon how you want to look at it, whether you want to look at it as something being unfortunate or fortunate, because he would have obviously been heading on um, to a better place. Unfortunately, what eventually happened was less than optimal. As on May 25th, which would have been Sunday, the comic book legend, icon, superstar, pick an adjective, they all undersell his contribution to the medium, ultimately passed away. Quote, Peter David passed away last night, unquote, wrote O'Shea. David, quote, we are devastated, unquote. Yeah, well, as sad as losing a loved one is, on the more positive aspect of it is at least he's no longer suffering. His suffering's over. So I know that's not much consolation, but um, probably not much consolation, but at least his suffering's over. So he's not suffering anymore, at least. Born in 1956 to Jewish parents residing in Fort Meade, Maryland, David's interest in comic books and superheroes was first sparked, like many young fans, thanks to their prominence in the era's culture. Quote, when I was about 5 years old, my parents would take me for haircuts, and the barber shop had comic books out for the kids to read. Unquote. The man himself recalled to the now defunct comicsaddiction.com in 2007. Quote, most of them were Harvey comics. So growing up he was reading a lot of like Casper the Friendly Ghost, um, Sad Sack, Hot Stuff, Wendy the Witch, Little Audrey, Herman and Catnip, Baby Huey. That's probably a lot of stuff he was reading growing up. So the first books that intrigued me were Casper and Wendy. I got into superheroes as a result of the Superman TV series with George Reed's the 1952's Adventures of Superman, which was probably still running in syndication when he was, because that show only ran from 52 to 58, I believe, for like those 7 seasons. Um, but but they were still running in syndication for years. So because they'd always say at the end, quote, Superman is based on the character appearing in Superman magazine, and I thought, quote, there's magazines? I gotta check those out. Unquote. David's original interest in writing was sparked by his father, who himself served as a reporter for the Newark Evening News after the family moved to New Jersey. Quote, sometimes purely as a side thing, he'd be sent to review films, unquote, detailed David when asked about the moment he decided he wanted to be a writer during the 2003 Q&A session he held through his official website. Quote, if it was something that was age appropriate, he'd bring me along. And then we'd go back to the newspaper office and he would write his review and I'd write mine. And on occasion, he'd crib stuff from my review and use it as his own. Yeah, that sounds kind of funny. Use your kid to help augment your own stuff. That's cute. That's cute. Ah. let's see. All right. So as we continue on here, um, eventually falling out of comics during his early teenage years, David originally believed he would follow in his father's footsteps and become a general news reporter. However, he would find himself jumping right back into the fold thanks to a chance meeting between himself and the Uncanny X-Men. I saw X-Men Volume 1, number 95, on the stands and thought, quote, what did they do to the X-Men? Who are these guys? Unquote, said David in the letters page of X Factor Volume 1, number 234. Quote, I bought it, loved it, tracked down number 94, and then went on my first Comic Con in years and purchased Giant Size X-Men Volume 1, Number 1 for all of $1. And there's Giant Size X-Men right there. As David grew older, he soon found himself entering the publishing business, through which he eventually landed a job working in Marvel's comic sales department. Though his early years with the publisher saw him unsuccessfully attempt to sell a variety of comic book ideas to the publisher during his he would ultimately find success when in 1985, then newly appointed Spider-Man line editor Jim Owsley brought one of his wall crawler related stories, which he then published in Peter Parker bought one of his wall crawler related stories, which he then published in Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Volume 1, Number 103. And with that, David was officially off to the races. Later that same year, Owsley would purchase another of David's Spider-Man stories, The Death of John DeWolf, um, before cutting him from the book due to internal pressure from the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, who was not happy that the Spider editor had been buying stories from a member of the company's sales team. In parentheses, at the time, such crossover was considered a, in small quote, conflict of interest due to the potential for said sales member to falsely represent a given book's reception, either by claiming a book they worked on was far more popular than it actually was, or by torpedoing um, another's reputation in order to make theirs look better. Unparentheses. Hmm. However, a few short months later, after being canned, David was contacted by Shooter's successor, Bob Harras, to helm The Incredible Hulk Volume 1, which at the time was doing so poorly that no one else wanted to write it. Wow, talk about at least putting yourself out there, right? He gets fired, but then they end up deciding to bring him back. As a result of this call, David would take over the book with issue number 331, in doing so, kicking off his 12-year run as the Jade Giant's main writer, during which time he introduced such iconic Marvel Comics concepts as the Maestro, Joe Fixit, and even the original Thunderbolts team, though created by Kurt Busiek and Mark Bagley. The pair worked with David to surprise readers by having them first appear in The Incredible Hulk Volume 2, number 449. His Marvel Comics work across the late 80s and early 90s, also including runs on such titles as Wolverine Volume 2, X Factor Volume 1, and Spider-Man 2099 Volume 1, who, in parentheses, whose title character he co-created with artist Rick Leonardi, on parentheses there. David's talents during this era were not exclusively limited to the House of Ideas, as an initial run on The Phantom, Volume 1, um, would open the door for him to work at DC. I'm wondering if The Phantom, Volume 1, I wonder if that was, well, obviously it wasn't David McKay. It's David McKay was long dead, but, King Feature Syndicate. I wonder if that's the one. While the Hulk and Spider-Man may have defined the pre-21st century time at Marvel, or his pre-21st century time at Marvel, David's 80s and 90s DC work was likewise marked by significant runs on Aquaman Volume 5, Supergirl Volume 4, and Young Justice Volume 1, the last series of which he handled in its entirety up until it was canceled in order to promote the titular team's members to full-blown Teen Titans. Then in the new millennium, Marvel Comics, or more specifically, their then superstar writer Brian Michael Bendis, made the decision to have the Scarlet Witch utter her now infamous declaration, quote unquote, "no more mutants." In the aftermath, David was handed the reins to X Factor Volume 3, which rather than present a usual smaller quote mutant super team story, saw him opt to use the chaos of the mutant species upheaval, an opportunity to introduce readers to a group of superpowered X-gene positive sleuths for hire, led by the multiple man Genie Madrox. After his time with the Mutant Detective Agency, wrapped in October 2013, David would take a break from the industry in order to recover from his first stroke before returning in 2014 to pen the third volume of Spider-Man 2099, as well as the continuing adventures of the X Factor moniker and all new X Factor Volume 1. All right. With both series having wrapped up in 2015, Marvel Comics then offered David the chance to tackle the new adventures of Spider-Man, then newly revived for the umpteenth time clone, Ben Reilly, following his villainous break as the second incarnation of the Jackal. And though he was initially hesitant to accept the job due to his general disinterest in the character, he ultimately accepted due to seeing the creative potential in, quote, writing a comic book where the lead character is a villain, unquote, as he found that, quote, having a character with such a skewed viewpoint of the world seemed very intriguing the more I thought about it, unquote. Amidst his continuing health struggles, David would continue tackling a, in small quotes, who's who list of his smaller quotes greatest hits for the publisher, with his final few titles including Maestro World War M Volume 1, New Fantastic Four Volume 1, Genisville Captain Marvel Volume 1, and Joe Fixit Volume 1. Finally, his comic book career would come to an end with the 5-issue Symbiote Spider-Man Volume 1 miniseries, which released in July 2024, so almost a year ago, shortly before his Medicaid struggles and simultaneous health flare-ups began. Well, maybe God needed a talented comic book writer in heaven. Maybe that was the thing. Of course, though the work specifically noted above may have been his most acclaimed and well known, they are far from the full extent of his comic book bibliography, with other such notable titles including Captain Marvel Volume 4, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Volume 1, and Dynamite Comics Battlestar Galactica BSG vs. BSG Volume 1 crossover. Further, David was also a storied, in parentheses, no pun intended, novelist, with some of his books including Babylon 5 Legions of Fire trilogy, the original Psyman and the Modern Author series, a large swath of movie novelizations ranging from The Rocketeer, the original Spider-Man trilogy, and Transformers Dark of the Moon, and an even greater amount of Star Trek novels. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I have seen his credit in a few things. It was just one of those things where you just see the credit and okay, whatever. But now that they do mention the screenwriting part of it, I think I've seen some of his screenwriting credits at times. So he also contributed individual scripts to animated series like Ben 10 Alien Force and Young Justice, as well as a pair of video games in 2009's Shadow Complex and 2010's Spider-Man Edge of Time. In bringing the news update / obituary to a close, as a big fan of David's comic book work, I can only admit that this news has truly left me at a loss for words. At the end of the day, my heart breaks for David's family, his friends, and everyone whose work left a mark on their lives. Personally, Young Justice Volume 1, X Factor Volume 3, and Spider-Man 2099 Volume 1 hold particular sentimental value in regards to my experience with comic books, and goodness knows Spider-Man Edge of Time helped keep me entertained when I was a broke in my early 20s and couldn't really afford the money required to, quote, go out and do things, unquote. And though he deserved so much better in his final days, as does everyone who has been and will find themselves leaving this world due to a likewise series of health complications, at the very least, we can take solace in the fact that he can finally rest. Amen on that. With that, I leave you with the words of David himself as told to an in-universe version of the writer himself by Rick Jones in The Incredible Hulk Volume 1, number 467, the final issue of his seminal series. Quote, you see, I could keep on telling stories about the Hulk. Keep on going, but there's other things in life, you know. It's like what Bruce told me. Realize what's important. Family, loved ones, that's the important thing. You're not the first writer to come to me and ask about the Hulk. And yeah, I could keep on talking about him for ages, but sometimes you just reach a point where something stops you. Maybe like time itself. Where you say, that's it, no more stories, I've said to say right now. Talk to somebody else, okay? I've said enough about the Hulk and about, in brackets, Betty Ross. Like I told you, I've said enough. I've said enough. And there we go. So, so with that, so before, of course, we move on to anything else, well, I need to step away from the. I need to go off camera here again for a quick moment. I'll be right back. As soon as I, of course, clear all this out. Or put some music on for you guys. Wrong one there. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So, what I'd like to do now, before we move on to the next portion of the program, I do want to, give my, of course, my condolences to Peter David family, and I'd also like to do a moment of silence for him. Observe a moment of silence. For those of you who did have a chance to read his work and stuff like that, um, it would be a good time to reflect on those things that he did. So right now, as I said, I'm going to go ahead and observe a moment of silence. Um, so here we go. All right, so there we go. So now, with that being said, of course, we're now going to move on to the wrestling wrap up. Look back to last night's Monday Night Raw, coming out of Saturday night's main event. Look ahead to tonight's. Look ahead, of course, to tonight's. You know, look ahead to tonight's NXT, including, of course, the this being the first night since Trick Williams won, coming off a Battleground, Trick Williams winning the TNA Championship, TNA World Championship. So, Anyways, so with that, let's go ahead. Let me talk about what happened on last night's Monday Night Raw, coming off of. So last night's Monday Night Raw came from the Youngling Center in Tampa, Florida. It's on Netflix with Michael Cole and Pat McAfee on commentary. The opening match saw Penta advance the Money in the Bank match by defeating Chad Gable and Dragon Lee in a triple threat match in which Chad Gable, or I'm sorry, which Penta got some help from Triple A's El Vikingo or El Hijo del Vikingo, who Chad Gable will be facing in the upcoming World Collide pay per view coming up in a couple weeks on the same day as a WWE Money in the Bank pay per view. Rusev defeated Akira Tozawa in just under a minute in the second match. In a triple threat match for the WWE World Tag Team titles, the New Day retained over the Viking Raiders and American Made. And then in a singles match, Kairi Sane defeated Liv Morgan as recent Judgment Day edition Roxanne Perez came out to try to give Morgan a helping hand, only for her to ultimately cost Morgan the match. While of course Perez and Raquel Rodriguez were arguing on the outside of the ring as Liv Morgan tried to execute the Oblivion on Kairi Sane. Kairi Sane was able to reverse it into a small package for the 3 count. And of course, there's some tensions going on now within the Judgment Day, further tensions as with the recent addition of Roxanne Perez and acting more like Roxanne's trying to seduce Dominique. It looks like Liv Morgan's finding herself on the other end of this game, where she was the kind of the wedge in Dominique's previous relationship with Rhea Ripley. So, and then the main event saw in another triple threat Money in the Bank qualifier, Seth Rollins advance over Finn Balor and Sami Zayn, with of course getting interference from Bronson Reed as well as Braun Breaker. Only for Jey Uso to also try to get involved, and then ultimately leading to a confrontation between CM Punk and Seth Rollins. So that's all that happened on last night's Monday Night Raw. So now, of course, we're going to look ahead to tonight's NXT. And, of course, this will be Trick Williams' first NXT since winning the TNA World Championship. Coming up from the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, on the CW with, of course, Booker T and Corey Graves and Vic Joseph on commentary. The night will open up with Ricky Saints defending the WNXT North American title against Ethan Page after Saints, of course, was attacked while he was on commentary. I think it was last week by Page. In his first official match since signing with NXT after winning the contract on the LFG show, Jasper Troy will take on a mystery opponent. Tatum Paxley will be taking on Jada Parker. TNA's Mike Santana comes to take on All right, sorry about that, guys. My computer apparently just all right, so my computer apparently just my computer just apparently restarted itself for some reason. I don't know why, but well, I was able to at least get back in here, so without it like totally cutting off. So that was good, but but that sometimes that's kind of the weird thing that happens. But anyways, so yeah, so we're going over the NXT show. NXT show. I'm gonna go off camera here for a quick moment. I want to go check something real quick. I'll put some music on while I'm gone. I'll be right back here. Be right back. All right, I'm back. So sorry about that. I was just checking some. I was trying to see if what just happened was something that was more house range or I think it was just in my room apparently because um but anyways, hopefully that won't happen again. um but with that being said, so let's see now. So the other piece of well, let me just make sure I that I oh yeah, so the last thing we were talking about was TNA's Mike Santana taking on Tavian Heights. And then the main event will see Stephanie Vaquer defending the NXT Women's title against JC Jane. So that's all that's going down on tonight's on tonight's on tonight's NXT. Some other little piece of wrestling news to just talk about a little bit. So apparently now, once again, things are heating up between WWE and AEW. As of course, WWE did hold its Battleground event this past Sunday against AEW's Double or Nothing. Apparently, they're going to go head to head again in July, as as while 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 AEW will be doing its All In pay per view on July the 12th. WWE will be holding a Saturday night's main event on the same day at around the same time, as well as that same weekend holding their second ever all women's pay per view Evolution. And they just announced today that they're going to also do an NXT pay per view premium live event, Great American Bash. So So that's all I got for you on the wrestling wrap up. So now let's go ahead with today being Tuesday. Today being Tuesday. Um, Today being Tuesday. May the 27th, 2025. Let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. History! So let me just go through here. Let's see, 1995, 2000, 2005, and 2005. All right. So first off, we're going to go back to 1965, 60 years ago today. As on this date, 60 years ago today, let me get that up. On this date, 60 years ago today, um, on this date, 60 years ago today, the first issue of Metamorpho from DC Comics went on sale on this date back in 1965, 60 years ago today. The story was Attack of the Atomic Avenger, written by Bob Harvey, penciled by Ramona Fradone, with Charles Parrish doing the inking. So on this date back in 1965, 60 years ago today, the first issue of Metamorpho went on sale on newsstands on this date back in 1965. So now moving on to the next piece of Nietzsche history as we get ready to move on. So some ahead to the year 2000. On this date in the year 2000, um, now some former ECW wrestlers had decided to join Extreme Pro Wrestling, kind of the West Coast version of ECW. On this date, back in the year 2000, part of their D-Day event weekend, XPW's D-Day Aftermath Part 1 was held at Strongbow Stadium in Bakersfield, California. The main event saw in a three-way dance, Sabu retained the XPW World Heavyweight title over Chris Candido and the Messiah. Also on the card, of course, Abdullah the Butcher defeated Homeless Jimmy. Pogo the Clown defeated Axel Rotten. Tracy Smothers defeated Tony Jones. John Cronus lost to Tool. And that's pretty much all that happened on that date 25 years ago. 25 years ago today, XPW held its D-Day Aftermath Part 1 as part of their D-Day event weekend on this date back in the year 2000, 25 years ago. Now moving on to the year 2005. On this date in the year 2005, DreamWorks Animation's Madagascar premiered in theaters on this date back in 2005, 20 years ago today. Released in theaters May 27, 2005. Received mixed reviews from critics who praised the visuals and charm, but criticized the story and humor. It was a success at the box office, growing. It was the sixth highest grossing film of 2005. So, on this date, 20 years ago today, DreamWorks Madagascar premiered in movie theaters. And also on this date in 2000, let me first, of course, clear this out. And also on this date in 2005, 2005 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice. As also on this date in the year 2005, Shuffle, the OVA Shuffle Prologue from Asread was released on this date back in 2005. So 20 years ago today, Asread's OVA Shuffle Prologue, which is the prologue to the Shuffle anime series, was released on this date back in 2005. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. Of course, we will be back here tomorrow night. Hopefully, what happened just a few minutes ago won't become a regular thing, obviously. But with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Of course, back here tomorrow with more Niche News. I'll also be back here on Sunday, as Rick Piper will be joining me, as we'll be going back and looking back on comics that went on sale in May of 1940 from Prize Comics. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.